Hey everyone, my name is Mark Taylor, and today we're going to be looking at the book NOS4A2 by Joe Hill. And this is a horror story, this is a horror book, and like I've said before, I love to read lots of different genres. And so I like to check out different books. I like to read science fiction, I like to read action, thriller, classics, horror, fantasy, science fiction, if I already said that, all of the above. So Nosferatu is written by Joe Hill. He's the son of Stephen King and Tabitha King, and he's the brother to Owen King. So this is his third novel, and from what I've read, and I don't know everything there is about Joe Hill, but from what I've read, he chose the name Joe Hill because he wanted to be able to write and see what he could do on his own without the name King associated with him. He did not want to ride his dad and his mom's coattails as far as their writing career went, and so he wrote under the name Joe Hill. Nosferatu tells the story of Vic McQueen. She starts out with her as a little girl, and she has this bike, and when she rides this bike, she ends up coming to this covered bridge, and this covered bridge, she can actually, when she rides across, it takes her to different places outside of the other side of the bridge. So it's kind of a portal through the world that takes her to different areas. And these are real places that it takes her to. Meanwhile, you have this creepy serial killer named Charlie Manx, who has a car that has the license plate NOS4A2, Nosferatu. Nosferatu, I believe, is the German word for vampire. There's a famous movie. The guy kind of looks like it's an old black and white, I think it's silent film, but it's Nosferatu, and it looks like this mouse-like vampire, very creepy looking dude, long hands. But anyway, Nosferatu is the German word, I believe, for vampire. If it's not, then I'm way off, but I believe it's the term for vampire. And so Charlie Manx, he also has these strange abilities. His car, Nosferatu, is kind of his vehicle, literally, to take him where he needs to go. So Vic McQueen, she has this bike that crosses this covered bridge. He has this car that's this Rolls-Royce Phantom, or Rolls-Royce Wraith, 1930s Rolls-Royce that takes him where he needs to go. It has kind of a mind of its own, but it takes him to this place called Christmas Land, which is this real creepy dead place where he takes children and they're transformed into otherworldly creatures, and he basically lives off of their youth. Charlie Manx is very old, although he keeps his vitality by preying on these young children. So this is I'm torn about this book. I did like this book, but I think there's some weird things about it. Ultimately, the good is that there's solid writing. Joe Hill can write. He can tell a story, and he's like his father in that. He has a mastery of the language. He clearly is a skilled author, skilled writer. Very descriptive language. The characters are well defined. You definitely want to root for Vic McQueen and her husband, and you want to stop Charlie Manx. But it felt like a Stephen King book. And again, if you love Stephen King, then you'll probably love this book. I think if I had read this book, not having read Stephen King, or not knowing that this was Stephen King's son, it might have been a little bit different. I might have liked it more, but it felt redundant and it felt repetitive, simply because I have not read all of Stephen King's books. I've probably read only like maybe 6 or 7 of them. So I'm not some Stephen King expert, and I have not memorized all of Stephen King's books, but it felt so similar to Stephen King. Not only the writing, but the themes, just all of the components of the story felt like Stephen King. So in that sense, it felt disappointing in that it was kind of like, I've been here. We've done this. I was looking for something a little bit different. The other thing is Joe Hill wrote under the name, and again, he may have addressed this in interviews. I'm sorry, I'm not doing a ton of research into Joe Hill, but He wrote under a pseudonym so that he could, and I do know this, he wrote under a pseudonym so that he could find writing acclaim or whatever. His writing was going to be on the strength of his own writing ability, which I think is awesome and more power to him. And even if he did write under Joe King, because I think Owen King writes under that, do what you got to do. If you've got connections, if you have capabilities of getting into the publishing world and finding success, do whatever you got to do. There's nothing wrong there. But Joe Hill clearly wanted to kind of separate himself from his parents so that he could write on his own and find success based on his own merit, which a lot of respect to that. But then he writes so similarly to his father, which again, maybe can't help that, but he puts things in the book that are just like Stephen King's books. At one point, they look at a map that kind of is a map of this alternate world, and they're trying to find Charlie Manx, and there's a place up in Maine that has like Pennywise land, which Pennywise is from the book It, written by Stephen King. So if you're trying to separate yourself from your dad, and again, you can put whatever you want in your book, but if you're trying to separate yourself from your dad, putting Pennywise in your own book, saying that they're part of the same kind of world and universe and same land, you're writing within that, it was weird. It took me out of this book and said, okay, so we're doing that. We're now mentioning Stephen King books and Stephen King characters. Then you have just the mental psychic ability. It's like a lot like The Shining, to where you've got characters who they're communicated with through these psychic Scrabble tiles. You've got Vic, who she gets these severe headaches and nosebleeds when she uses this bridge that teleports her. You have Charlie Manx, the villain, who basically psychically feeds off of these children. Again, it just felt like you've got Firestarter, you've got The Shining, I think Dr. Sleep also, that Stephen King deals with a lot of these same themes and and again, not that you can't do this, but again, it just felt very much like a Stephen King book with the same types of capabilities and abilities and themes. You have the killer car that's tied to this crazy old owner, which was very much like Christine, which is one of Stephen King's first novels. And so you've got NOS4A2, which is this old Rolls-Royce Wraith. Say that 5 times fast. Rolls-Royce Wraith, which Christine was I think a Fury, a Chrysler Fury, this old Chrysler Fury. But they're both these murderous vehicles that have minds of their own. They drive on their own. They use the radio however they want to, and they're connected to this person and change them into this killer, or they use this killer. So again, very similar to Christine. You have a bunch of creepy kids that are not quite human in the final, again, like Children of the Corn sort of thing. And again, creepy kids in horror is not anything new. It's a trope that's very common, so there's nothing wrong with that. But again, like these creepy kids that are calling Vic, and they're in the very end, they're trying to kill her. It felt familiar. You have one of the main characters, the girl who communicates with the Scrabble tiles. One of the problems that happens, Vic gets these headaches and the nosebleeds. Well, this girl, she basically loses her ability to communicate. She stutters and stammers the more she uses the Scrabble tiles. And the stuttering and the stammering, that's something I've really only seen in Stephen King books, and he seems to put in a lot of things with someone with a speech impediment, and it's, especially if you're listening to it, if you're listening to an audiobook, is very distracting. And I know that these are real situations and real impediments that people deal with, but it's very distracting to have that character. And again, the only other time I've seen that is in a Stephen King book. So to have that as one of the main characters, are you trying to differentiate yourself or are you not? And finally, the writing style, it felt exactly like a Stephen King book. And again, if you like Stephen King, then you'll like this. I just felt I was trying to find something different. I can read Stephen King whenever I want. I was trying to find something scary, something, some sort of horror story, and I was going to give NOS4A2 a chance. But the characters, and this is something that all Stephen King characters do, is they'll say rhymes or jingles to themselves. You know, they'll say you know, as they're doing something, they'll just kind of to themselves say, "Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle," or you know, a killer, someone who's deranged, will, as they're killing someone, say like, "Bop them on the head, bop them till they're dead." Just these very distinct, like, I don't hear anybody say this in real life. I don't hear anyone do this in real life. And I guess you could think these things in your head. It's kind of this neurotic stream of consciousness way of talking and thinking, but all of Stephen King's characters do it. Some of the time it's very interesting and I really enjoy it. Some of the time it's kind of distracting, but all of his characters, all of Joe Hill's characters do this in this book. And this is the thing, is that all the characters do this. If it was one character who that was kind of his or her thing, that would be different, but it's all the characters. So they all do these like little jingles and sayings and rhymes and singing to themselves. And so it doesn't make sense that that's not what all characters do. And if this is something that's clear and defining, then it shouldn't be something that comes out of every character's mouth. And it just felt, again, very much exactly like a Stephen King book. So it might sound like I hated the book, but I was confused the whole time I read it. I was torn as I read this book. You know, what are you trying to do, Joe Hill? Are you trying to be like Stephen King, which there's nothing wrong with that, or are you trying to do your own thing? Because it felt like a carbon copy, and in that sense, if I had read this book on its own, never having read Stephen King, I might have had a very different opinion. But I've read Stephen King books. I've read books that sound and feel and look exactly like this. So let's get into the ratings, because I could spend a lot of time with this because I just thought it was very weird, very off-putting. So writing, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5. This sounds harsh. I think that Joe Hill can write really well. I think Joe Hill can write much better than I can. He has a wonderful grasp on details, on similes, on metaphors. He is very descriptive, vivid imagination, vivid writing style. He can make lots of things come to life. He over describes everything. It's just like his dad. There was one point in the book where I realized he had a simile in every single sentence. So he can write, he can describe, he can come up with some incredible metaphors and similes that really bring the pictures to life. But if you do that every single sentence, it's just like eating ice cream. I love ice cream, but if I have it for every meal, every day, I grow tired of it. It becomes gross. And so when you're listening to this book, you're reading this book, and every single sentence has some very crazy, vivid simile or metaphor or description of something, just move on. Not everything has to have that. Just say what something is. He looked over there. He didn't look over there like a lion who had lost its prey and was searching for. Just say the bad guy was searching for it. We know that it's a bad situation. I don't have to have a simile that describes exactly what kind of situation it is. And it was just every sentence, every single time. It was 700 pages of this. Just say what something is sometimes. I don't have to have some crazy metaphor or simile to help me understand it. So in that sense, very good ability to write. That was a terrible sentence. He was a very good writer. He just overwrote. He overwrote everything. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Next we have characters. The characters, again, mixed bag. I loved Vic and Lou. Vic and Lou got married. I loved those characters. He brought them to life. He made me root for them, cheer for them. Their love story was fantastic. That was actually kind of my favorite part of the book, was Vic and her troubled past, and Lou, who's kind of just this big, lovable dummy who just cares about Vic, cares about his son. He's just trying to do his best, and just their love story, and just how it was kind of, They're kind of star-crossed, but they're working at it. I loved that part of the book. I thought that was fantastic. If Joe Hill wrote a dramatic love story, I think he would do a fantastic job at it. And so I absolutely loved those characters. But then you get Charlie Manx and Bing, and they're supposed to be the villains. They're scary, they're killing people, they're serial killers. There was something, they're mysterious in that you don't know exactly everything that happened to Charlie Manx that made him into what he is. He's kind of a psychic vampire that feeds off of the youth of children. I mean, he's clearly evil. He kills people. Um, but he talked so much that it took away the the fear that you would have of him. He he seemed like just this old timey vaudevillian villain. It was just this weird, he would talk about like, oh, we don't do that, do we? We must go over here now, shall we? There was nothing scary about him. And then being the same, that he was such an idiot. I mean, he was clearly psychotic or sociopathic. He was a nut, raping and killing. I mean, there's some messed up stuff in this book, but they talked so much and made fun of. They were like two dumb sidekicks. You had Charlie Manx and then his idiot sidekick. I mean, it felt like a Disney villain and his stupid, goofy sidekick. And so it took a lot of the fear or just the dread out of it because they said so many dumb things and they talked all the time. So there wasn't the fear of this silent, brooding killer. It was just this chatty old man who talked about bringing kids to Christmas land. And so I don't know. I'm gonna give the characters a 4 out of 5. I actually have written down 5 out of 5, but I want my villain, my scare in a horror story. I want my villain to be terrifying, and there was nothing terrifying, in my opinion, about Charlie Manx and Bing. They were just demented weirdos. So yeah, I'm giving a 4. Plot. 700 pages on this book. I want to know more about Charlie Manx. I want to know more about where he came from, how he was created, what made him into. You just find out that he just killed his kids. He kills. He likes to kill kids. He has Christmas land. He takes them to this otherworldly place. I wanted to know more about him. He's not supposed to be a mysterious boogeyman because he talks all the time. Like I said in the characters, I just, the plot was fine. I thought Vic was awesome. I liked Vic with Lou. I liked that part of the story. I thought you could follow the story pretty well. I give it a 4.5 out of 5. But just again with the plot, if you're gonna have him as a main character, I want to know more about the villain. I want to know more about where he came from. It's just kind of there and it doesn't make sense. The purpose of the book. In my opinion, this is supposed to be a horror story, and like Stephen King books, there's also a lot about just humanity and the human struggle, the human endeavor in it. You have the characters of innocence, of losing your childhood, but I felt like it was supposed to be a scary story. I felt like Charlie Manx was supposed to be this creepy, unstoppable child killer, and I didn't think it lived up to that. I thought there was too much silliness. There was too much just goofiness in it, and so I didn't find it scary. I didn't. They were very. I can't think of any parts that I felt like were really terrifying or dreadful or scary. I felt Charlie Manx was more scary at the very beginning when you didn't know anything about him. You hadn't heard him talk for 45 pages of the book. And you kind of dreaded him coming around, but then he was in lots of the scenes and he talked all the time. So again, I didn't feel like the book really met the purpose that much. So I would give it a 4 out of 5 on the purpose and fulfilling that. Finally, did I like it? I'm clearly out of my mind here. As I'm editing this, I did not like this book. I would not read this again.
If you like Stephen King, read it. Give it a shot. I mean, I give this like a 60 or a 70 out of 100. The characters, the plot, I just did not like this. Way too long. I'm out of my mind. So there's my final conclusion.
If you're a Stephen King lover, obviously read it. If you like Joe Hill, obviously read it. If you want just horror, check it out. Again, my opinions are my opinions, so do your thing. I just think it's a weird book all around. As always, my name is Mark Taylor. Keep reading, and you don't know how valuable